Video to talk about experiences that I've had with my beautiful daughter where I was trying to avoid her suffering, or being afraid, or, the one that stands out to me the most was the experience I had when I got my first period, and I didn't know anything about them. And the year before, I'd had my appendix out. And so I'm sitting there in the bathroom and I have blood in my undies and I'm like, what the hell? I'm dying, right? Was the first thought as a 12-year-old. I'm dying. Something went horribly wrong with my operation because it was recent, a year before, and the doctors did something wrong and I am dying now. And I'm freaking out in the bathroom. And we were on holidays. We were visiting my aunt and my uncle in South America. And I'm sitting in her bathroom freaking out. And my aunt, and I don't know how long I'd been in there, and I couldn't stop crying. And my aunt came to the door, she knocked at the door and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." I was in tears. And she said, "I'll go get your mum," which was no help, but she went and got my mum anyway. So my mum comes and she says, "Can I come in?" And I said, "Yes." And so she comes in and she sees, right? So the next thing I know, she brings me a pad and a clean pair of undies. And then what happened? She didn't talk about it. I ended up learning all of this from my older cousins while I was there on holidays, right? I had one that was 15 and one that was 17, girls, right? And so they explained it. She left it with them. She didn't even want to talk about it. She was so embarrassed about the whole topic. My mum, right? So the girls explained it to me and I was like, oh, okay. But for me, it was such a traumatic experience that I never wanted my daughter to go through that. So I've been telling her since she was pretty much 5 years old, or as early as she could understand. I would be talking to her about periods, and telling her that this is normal and this is what happens. But there's blood involved, And so when she got to about 10 years old, she came to me and I could see there was something not right, there was something. And she said to me, "Mum," she says, she started asking me more questions about the periods. And I was like, because I think some of the girls at school were already getting them, so she was already aware that it was already happening and it could happen any minute now. And I was like, okay. So they started talking about it. And then I was like, what's up? I could feel her energy wasn't the usual energy. And she said to me, "I'm just scared, how much blood comes out, how much," and then all these questions. And then I had the realization, you can't take away from that experience the fear that you're going to feel because it's an unknown. It's an experience you haven't had before. You don't know what to expect. When people talk about there's going to be blood, she's probably thinking there's like buckets of blood coming out of you. It's like, are you going to contain it all? It's going to be a mess. Who knows in her imagination what she was thinking that was going to happen, So she was still afraid, even though I had prepared her for that experience, And then there was the experience at school where one of her friends decided, she had this friend all through kindy. And then in year one, that friend decided they were in different classrooms, wanted nothing to do with her. So in year one, she went through the stress of, this friend doesn't want me anymore, the rejection. So then she, went through most of year one, and I'd ask her and she'd be like, "I didn't sit with anyone today," or "I didn't want to be with anyone today," or because that friend didn't want to be with her. And my daughter's not like that. Once she's your friend, she's your friend, From little, she's always been like that. She's very loyal in that way, So anyway, by the end of year one, she makes this beautiful new friend and they're together all year two. But of course, all year two, because they're becoming such good friends, I imagine they were making, a ruckus in the classroom and it was too much for the teacher. So she separated them for year three. And then it started, her tears of, "I don't want to go because this friend won't want to be friends with me anymore." And the trauma of, being rejected yet again. But this friend really loved her. Their personalities were so similar. They could be themselves with each other, in every way. They're just such a lovely friendship. And she was just so scared that she was going to lose this friend, again. It's going to happen again. And for the first few months, I was trying to convince her that just because it happened before doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Yes, it might, but maybe that's teaching her that detachment. You know, friends come and go. They do, because then with that friend, eventually they stop being friends as well by year 5. This was year 3. But yes, they stayed friends until year 5. And then, because they all knew they were going to different high schools, they tended to merge more towards the ones that were going to similar high schools, you know? So I don't know why, but that's what happened. You know, by year 5, that other friend was with someone else. But anyway, through year 3, we were going through this trauma of, I'm going to be alone again because this friend won't want to be with me. And I really like this friend, right? So we went through all that. And 3 months into it, and there were tears every morning, tears. I don't want to go because I don't want to go through that. She didn't say that rejection, but that's what she was fearing, right? That being rejected. And anyway, so about 3 months in of the tears and all the rest of it, and in the morning I would joke and I would pretend that my hand was an octopus, you know, just to make her laugh before she went into class. And she had an amazing teacher that year. She was just so good with her, you know, it helped her through that moment that, you know. And I'd pretend my hand was an octopus and I'd put it, you know, close to her face and do this, you know, and I'd say, this octopus is sucking out all that sadness. And I said, and then the octopus would go, because it would make the octopus sick. And then she'd start smiling and laughing, you know, because, oh, the octopus, you know. But then she was still sad going to school. You know, I couldn't take it away. I couldn't take that experience away from her. I couldn't stop the pain. And then I realized one day, because by that stage I'd already written the first book. My first book, Your Past is a Gift. That one over there, the big one in the middle. I always had to put it in the middle because it's the one that's the biggest. The others are all pretty much the same size. But yeah, I realized, oh, wait, this is her experience. I can't take this away. She came here to have this experience and learn for herself. You know, I can't tell her what the lesson is. I can't tell her that it's detachment because I don't know. You know, only her soul knows, and only her soul, it put her here in this place to have this experience. I can't tell her what it is, and I can't fix it for her. I can't stop what's happening. I can't change it. And so one day I took a deep breath in, and I thought to myself, all I can do is be here for this whole thing. I'm not just here for the happy moments. I had that realization. I'm not just here for the good moments. I'm here for all of it. I'm here for every single moment. And there will be moments where she's sad, and there will be moments where she's in pain. And all I can do is be there for her. That's all I can do. I can't fix it. I can't change it. It's not my place to do that. So, my beautiful beings, circling back. Because now I'm on the other side of it. Now I'm the mother. Now I'm the one watching, observing her experiences. But I didn't have that before my awakening. I didn't know what that was, to be a mother and to feel helpless when your children are in pain and there's nothing you can do about it. I even thought that year of changing schools for her. I was going to change her to a different school. If it's a whole new environment, all new people. And my husband, in all his glorious wisdom, said to me, just because you change the environment doesn't mean you fix the problem. It doesn't take away what's happening. You're not helping her. So the truth is, the experiences aren't about feeling bad or offended, you know. It's really about, well, understanding that that's the experience you came to have, you know, at the deepest level. So every experience that you go through, you need to go through. I didn't realize or understand any of that until I started to observe my daughter and her experiences. And no matter how much you don't want your kids to suffer, it's not up to you, because it's not your soul, it's not your journey, it's their journey, you know? So observing her and her journey, it became even more clear to me, you know, my journey. And when I look back at the experiences, the painful experiences I've been through, every single one had a message, had something for me to learn, you know? The first one, of course, the biggest one for me was my mum's rejection, you know, that belief that I created at the age of 5. And once I realized the truth of it, you know, that she never rejected me. It was just my interpretation of what was going on at the time. It wasn't the truth. But how much of what we interpret in our childhood is not the truth, but it's what we take away. And it shapes all the experiences that we go through in our lives later on, you know? So, yeah, that was, for me, it was quite an eye-opening, whoops. For me, it was quite an eye-opening experience, being a mother and going through all those moments with my daughter of how much you really don't have control over anything, you know, and but it also gave me appreciation, because I remember one day I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, you know, when I was beating myself up about yelling at her, you know, she's 4 years old and I'm yelling at her for something she did, which wasn't really about her. You know, I was just taking it out on her. It was my frustrations at the time. And that's the realization I had. You know, it was financial frustration I was having. And every time that flared up, I would yell at her. But it was never anything that she had done that I was really yelling at her about. And in that moment, I just had this deep connection with my mum of, oh my God, that's what you were going through. You know, that's what you were going through. That, you know, that you did all those things, you know, when I was a child. It was your own frustration. And so there's this beautiful deep connection that you have when you go through the same experiences as your parents and you realize, oh, that's what you were going through. That's what you were feeling. That's what you were, all of it. You know, you finally, the penny drops and you finally realize, oh, okay. All that yelling, all of that I went through was never about me. You know, we make it all about us, that we've done something wrong, and, you know, and because if I was a good girl, she wouldn't be yelling at me. And if I was a good girl, she wouldn't need to smack me. So I must be doing something wrong that's upsetting her. It must be me because she's doing it to me. She's yelling at me. She's smacking me, or she's whatever it is in your life, you know, that happened. She's abusing me. So I must have done something wrong to have, you know, provoked this. I must have done something wrong. We always put it to, we've done something. And then when you realize the truth, it was like, oh, it was never about me. It was always about what she was going through, or he was going through. When you go through the experience, you can only see it when you've been through it. You can only see it. I couldn't see it before I had my daughter. There was no way. I just couldn't see it. And then the other truth, you know, I sat with was, I like who I am. So does it matter that I went through all that? You know, does it matter? You know, it doesn't change who I am today. If anything, what I have gained is that I have a deeper compassion for people who go through abuse, because I've been through it. I know how it feels. You know, that you're this little being with no power, and these beings around you are just doing things to you that you just don't like. I don't want to go through this anymore. And that feeling of it's never going to stop, that feeling is the worst feeling, that there is no end to this abuse, you know, to this person's, what they're doing. And I didn't have, you know, one of my cousins was lucky enough that her dad stepped in one day. And he had a word with the mum that, you know, if she ever did that again, that he would do that to the youngest. And the youngest was like her baby. You know, no one touched my baby. You know, but the elders, us, the elders, we were always copying it, you know, because we were the older ones. But I didn't have that, at least for her, halfway through somewhere there, before she, like, by the time she was 12, 13, it stopped. I didn't have that. My dad just, he trusted my mum with everything, and he just would not step in. And he's the type of person that where there's conflict, he'll just walk away. He won't even participate, or he just doesn't see the point. That was his thing always. I don't see the point. Where there's an argument or a conflict, I get it in a sense, because if you join the conflict, it's like you're adding more wood to that fire. You're just making that fire bigger. And then there's the problem when you step into a conflict where there's two people in opposition, you have to take a side. Obviously, you'd have to take my mum's side. So I'd lose every time. You know, in my uncle's case, he took my cousin's side. And so it stopped. But when you step into an argument, when there's, you know, a conflict, and there's already two people in this conflict, you have to choose a side. There is no third perspective. You're there to resolve the conflict. But nothing is forever. Everything changes, you know. And I grew up with especially my dad, always saying, people don't change. People don't change. But I know that's not true, because I changed. And perhaps for me, what I feel is I changed back into who I was before I was told by this world, you can't be that. Not in this world. It's not safe. You can't be that. So you have to learn to be all of this other stuff, to fit in, to not draw attention to yourself, because it's not safe. You know, at the age of 5, I was already talking to Jesus, and I was telling my parents about all these beautiful experiences. We'll talk about it more in the next one. But you can't go out into the world as a 5-year-old. You can't go to school. What's the teacher going to say? Oh, because Jesus told me, you know, that. And she'd be looking at me like, whoa, you know, you really don't belong here. And the kids, well, they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, you know. So I guess I finally let go of all the layers, that I could go back to what I was before the world told me what I had to be or needed to be to fit into this world. All right, my beautiful beings. We love you dearly. Remember to click like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the messages. And we'll see you in the next video, okay? Bye for now.